Hello, my name's Jodie, and today I have with me my good friend Isaac, and I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Okay, yeah. My name's Isaac. I'm a trans guy. And as Jodie said, we met about 4 years ago, I feel, when we started film school.
Nearly 5.
But, God, yeah, that's a way to age me. Yeah, 23 years old and that's, ooh. I think I only told you about, 6 odd months ago, something like that.
You never had mentioned it before.
No. Well, it's actually something that's quite important to me, but that's just, I think, something that's relatively new to me with actually telling people.
Yeah, this is kind of like your first time speaking about it openly online, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I came out on Facebook when I was about 16, but obviously that's just with school friends and family, so it's not quite so public as this.
Right. How do you feel about that? Sound like your therapist. How does that make you feel, Isaac?
It feels good. It feels all right. It's only been this year, I think, that I've actually started to own that part of myself. And that's just come from growth and confidence, I think, really, in that if anybody has a problem with it, that's entirely their problem. And it's such a massive part of my life that why is it something that I have to hide? When I'm the one that feels like I have to hide it. I tell people and they welcome it. I've had some horrible situations where people have welcomed it, but then later down the line maybe found out that they haven't so much. But that's their problem, not mine.
What do you mean by some people that haven't accepted it? Whether you think they've accepted it, but then you've heard otherwise further down the line?
Well, when I was younger, I grew up on the Isle of Wight. It's a place where everyone is pretty much the same. Everyone is cis, everyone is straight, everyone's, pretty much everyone's white. And it's very much a place of, I feel like, closed-mindedness. Fortunately, not everyone is. But there's definitely that type of mentality where I would tell people that I was trans or I came out at my school, and then I started socially transitioning in my first year of sixth form, medically transitioning in my second year of sixth form. And, you end up going out with friends and you just kind of find out that somebody will make a joke that they think is quite funny, but really it's actually just a joke at me. Or just asking really inappropriate questions or doing really inappropriate things. And fortunately, I haven't had a lot of that.
I feel like back when we were at school, I remember people getting bullied for being
Just different. You
Yeah.
don't fit in, and then it's like you're just going to be a bit...
You get bullied.
Yeah.
I remember that, and I remember gay being an insult.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, when my brother was at school, he's 3 years younger than me, he was telling me that they'd had awareness days and stuff, and I felt like so much changed in those 3 years between the two of us, just around accepting other people. Do you feel like in the past 5, 6, 7 years since we were at school that there's been a lot of progression in the awareness and an acceptance of trans people?
I think so. I think that could be partly down to the fact that myself as a person, I've grown up, and then therefore the people around me have sort of grown up and matured, so people are going to accept it. For the most part, I've had people welcome it with open arms, but I think it's definitely also it's trans people have become a bit more seen, I think, and there's still a lot more representation that needs to be done, and trans people need to have, as in just given opportunities. I think still more opportunities. There's still so much more that needs to be done. We're not done, but I think it's definitely in a better place than we ever have been.
So when was the first time that you realised you felt different in terms of your gender?
I think it literally is my earliest memory.
Really?
When I was 4, being back in reception, and I always very much fit into that sort of tomboy mould. I had the long blonde hair and I was red as a little girl. However, I never really fit into that that stereotype, as you will. And I remember being dressed up as a firefighter, and this girl comes up to me and she goes, "Oh, you can't dress like that. Only boys can be firefighters." Which, for one, massively problematic. Massively problematic.
What a bitch.
But also, secondly, yeah, what a bitch. But secondly, that's exactly what I said. 4-year-old little me, that's really problematic. What a bitch. But no, for me, I couldn't wrap my head around that. I think you're 4 years old. I don't think I really saw much of a difference between boys and girls. And probably because, albeit, yes, I was read as a girl, I had a very feminine name, this, that, and the other. But also, a lot of my friends were boys. I liked playing football. I liked, going out and finding bugs and walking back in after my lunch break with really muddy hands. And that's a stereotype. That's a massive stereotype. But when she said that, it was like, well, I don't understand, because I don't feel like there's a difference between me and a boy. Mm-hmm. And that's because I am one. But for me, I didn't have, 4 years old again, I didn't have that vocabulary, but also I didn't have that vocabulary of knowing what trans was for about another decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess that's why raising awareness is so important, because without that, there'd be so many more years added onto that for you, like when you could put a word to how you were feeling. Mm-hmm. How did you come about that? Was that online?
Well, as in finding the word?
Yeah.
Yeah, finding the word.
Finding the word. Discovering it.
Yeah, I was on YouTube, and at the time I knew about my sexuality and how I was attracted to women. So in that mindset, I was like, lesbian. Mm-hmm. But I don't feel like a lesbian. So I'd watch these videos online, and I think I did that from a place of like, I'm trying to educate myself and also trying to work myself out, and probably also kind of empower myself a little. But I'd watch these videos of these women who were great, like very funny, very interesting, intelligent women. And I would just sit there and think, the only thing that I relate to you is the fact that we both find women attractive. And I know that's why I'm watching your videos, but I don't relate to you in any other way. Mm-hmm. And I scrolled down on the sidebar where you have the suggested videos and found this guy who was like 3 years on testosterone, photo transition, something like that. And clicked it. He was a trans guy, an American trans guy, and the penny dropped, and I must have been about either 13 or 14. And at that time, I'd already been experiencing dysphoria and poor mental health for quite some years, but keeping that to myself. Mm. And so that penny drop moment was fantastic. It was like, oh my God, this is what I am, but also terrifying. I'd felt very alone and isolated a lot of my childhood in relation to my gender. So I didn't know why I felt like a boy, or the fact that I could feel like a boy. It was very confusing for me. So having had that video, I think that was actually the most scary time for me, because it was like, this is actually a thing. Mm-hmm.
It's real.
I don't know anyone else like this, and this is about 10 odd years ago now. There were no trans people in the media. There were no famous trans people, and if they were, then they were kind of shunned upon. And, all that I heard about trans people, especially trans youth, was from America, online again on YouTube, where I'd see these trans guys. I would mostly watch videos of trans guys, having really difficult relationships with their families. And that fear sort of escalated when, it was like, what if I'm not accepted for who I am? Mm. So it was a lot of things. It's like, am I trans? If this makes sense, or I need to accept myself and sort of work out what's happening. And I think it took about 6 to 8 months for me to at least feel somewhat okay about it. But I remember waking up every single day, and it was the first thought on my mind, and it just became so tiring for me, and just felt like, I remember thinking, I just want to wake up one day, but it isn't the first thing that I think of. Mm-hmm. That I'm trans, and that I was scared of being trans. And I think that's now why I accept it so much, because I've come so far, but little me was scared.
Oh my God.
Poor little boy.
It must be crazy thinking back to that and how far you've come since then. But in those years where you were questioning, like, why do I feel like this, and and didn't know, that it was an actual thing, that you weren't alone in it. Did you ever speak to anyone about how you were feeling?
Well, as in before I found out about me being trans? No.
Never?
Because I didn't know it was a thing. No. I used to have, I used to love drawing as a kid. And I remember, like, there's this one specific drawing that I used to do that if you go back now, it's this boy with blonde spiky hair, blue eyes, and it's like, it's me. It's kind of how I saw myself, and I almost felt like I'd live a bit of a double life, a bit of a Hannah Montana, with my friends and my family, that I would carry on being the person that they knew, and then somehow in the outer world I would be Jack, which is what I really liked as a name as a boy, as a kid. But yeah, I didn't speak to anyone about it really, and I think that's where the dysphoria and the mental health, which I started to experience from a very young age, actually came from, and that fear and that isolation. All those horrible feelings. I had a great childhood, but in terms of my gender and kind of working that out, it was weird.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Could you describe what trans means? We'll just start from that.
So there definitely has to be an appreciation between gender and sex. Sex is your biology. So it's what you're deemed as when you are born. A doctor will look at you and go, boy, you have a penis, girl, you have a vagina, and obviously it doesn't work like that. But that's what sex is, and then gender is how you identify mentally, your person, who you actually are, not your flesh. So when those two things don't match up, your gender and your sex, like it did for me, that makes you trans. If they do match up, your puzzle pieces link, then you're cis. But yeah, trans is transgender, transitioning to the to have a body that you feel more connected with.
I've heard a lot about gender dysphoria. What is that? Could you describe what that is?
So gender dysphoria is something you experience when you're trans or gender non-conforming or non-binary. In that, again, when your identity, who you are as a person, doesn't actually connect with your body. So for me, that was seeing the very, very feminine attributes of my body and holding an incredible amount of discomfort or hatred towards them, and kind of wanting to hide away those parts of myself. It's something that can really take a toll on your mental health. It can make you depressed or anxious or whatever. And everybody has it in different ways. But yeah, dysphoria is just where what you see in the mirror isn't what you are. And it can be really difficult.
What sort of things would trigger gender dysphoria now for you?
For me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Being
6 years, no, that's fine. 6 years on testosterone and, surgery as well, having had that. I'm fortunately in a place where I think I've grown so much and try to find comfort in the discomfort, as weird as that sounds, that my dysphoria now has lessened greatly, and I can look at parts of my body and I may not be completely comfortable with them, but that doesn't mean that I still can't love that part of my body or that part of myself. I might have a curve that I wouldn't have had if I were born cis male, or whatever. Like, it can be the smallest little things. I haven't got the biggest hands, for instance, but there's no reason as to why that I can't just be like, do you know what, fuck it, it's my body, it works for me. So my dysphoria, I'm very privileged in that it's lessened a lot. But I think that's also a benefit of having had testosterone. My voice has deepened. I look more masculine. I look how I feel, if that makes any sense. Which has brought a lot of confidence and peace, I think. Yeah, no, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about the whole little pre-chat that we had about the podcast. And she asked what I thought that was actually a really good question in that, how was that chat going? And such a small and meaningful, like meaningless question, but having conversations like this kind of brings up things that I don't feel like I'm fully aware of in myself. And it's good. It like in a weird way, like it can make me feel quite emotive and not dysphoric, but it can bring out thoughts or memories or just feelings that I don't know that I completely have.
It's really nice to actually sit and have conversations about stuff like that with people that you feel comfortable with, because it just makes you remember how far you've come.
I look at photos of me as a child and it's me, but it's really not. I don't see myself, which is so strange. But I can look at like a photo of me being 7 in school and I know that was me in my little dress, my little blue and white dress. And like I said, I had a great childhood. I had a lot of friends. I didn't experience bullying. I was, I had a great family. I loved my childhood. But I look at those photos of me and it kind of makes me sad that I'm never going to have a photo of me as a kid. But I do, and I think that's something that I need to take on and something I need to work on, that, why can't I just look at myself and be like, yeah, that was me. And that's not exactly how I wanted to look, but who gives a shit? That was me as a kid, and that's probably my next step. But it's weird seeing a person who you were that you just can't see any of yourself in. Because I'm also so different as a person, like just personality-wise from, I don't know, if we go back 7 years, I'm completely different. I'm happy, because I wasn't, confident, I come out in myself in that, I'm loud. And I remember being back in school having parents' evenings, and a couple of my teachers would say to my mum, oh yeah, he doesn't really talk, he's this, he's shy, he's blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I was shy and I was quiet, but that wasn't me, as in like my personality. That was just down to my mood and my mental health and sort of masking who I was. And I didn't feel that I could be myself because so much of my body, like my body was so important in how I identified and how I portray myself, which is probably why I try hard on, like, I like my clothes and I like, styling my hair. And I think it's because I now have that opportunity in my life where I can really just look how I want to look. I can be who I want to be. And looking back at those times when I was so young, I had those people give their opinion of me, which never felt like an attack, but it felt very personal. And I remember just sitting there. My science teacher in particular made a bit of a point at this with my mum. And I remember just sitting there thinking, but I'm not quiet, I'm not shy, I'm sad. But I never felt understood or really seen for who I was. I'd go and have a PE lesson, and I love sports. I used to play in every single sport that I could at school. I'd compete in everything as much as I could, and that's where I excelled. You get the endorphins, obviously, so you feel better after that anyway, but I was good at sports, and I was good compared to my peers. And I got such a buzz off that I could sort of be myself. And that's a massive thing about being trans. It's just being you.
That some people go through like the majority of their lives without ever feeling that, And now because people have become way more aware that's something to take notice of and respect. And thank God that that's become, more accepted.
Society is fortunately going in such a way that you haven't got to wait until you become a trans elder for you to actually, transition, or whether that's socially or medically, whatever you want to do. And, if you come out in later years anyway as trans and you're in your 40s, rock on, go with it. My God, I love that for you. you're doing something, you're doing it, and you're doing it for yourself. That's all that matters. And obviously, you know, you want it to be where it's like, yeah, you can be 10 years old and you can have a chat with your parents and say, I don't feel comfortable. I don't like this. And I had a bit of a chat like that with my mum when I was going through puberty. But society's going in a better way. I think just people, at least our generation, are getting more of a grasp of it, which I love.
Me too.
Yeah.
Speaking of you talking to your parents, how did the conversation go when you eventually told them that you were trans?
Ooh. Yeah, so, God, how old was I? I think I came out with my sexuality first.
Okay.
In that I find women attractive, so came out as what would have been gay to them at 13, 14. And it wasn't exactly by choice. So I was watching The X Factor with my mum as she comments on how all the guys are attractive and that I never really comment on that. And I just stayed very quiet. It was like, oh, no, oh, no. And yes, she goes, oh, you know, starts talking more as I'm talking less and less. And she just goes, oh, it's like, what, are you gay? And not like, are you gay?
What, are you gay?
Not aggressively, but like, what, are you gay? Like, what is it? And I just broke down and started crying because I don't think I told anybody. I hadn't told anybody. So again, that was something for me where I was like, oh, that's hard. And then she told my nan and my dad, and they both took that on, which was great.
Oh, she told them?
Yeah.
Was that something that you decided was better?
I think my mum had implied something to my dad. So my parents aren't together. So when I went to go and visit my dad, he was about to drop me off to so I could go home, and then he pulled up in the car and he was like, so your mum told me you have something to say.
Jesus Christ.
No, but my dad's I love my parents. They're both very supportive and they listen and they care, which is the best thing. And so yeah, no, I think I cried again with my dad.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Like so many years of having to hold something like that in, you know, so many people.
It's hard, yeah.
Yeah.
But because of all of the tears that I'd shed, about a year later, I was like, okay, I need to tell them. Again, I can't remember if at this point I was 14 or 15. I think I was 14. Maybe 50, I don't know. But I'd written a letter to both of them because I couldn't verbalise it and I really didn't know what to do. And I'd used some like online charity that you would sort of go to as a kid if you ever had a problem. I can't remember what it's called. But I was like, I'm trans, and I don't know what to do, and I really didn't tell them. I don't know how to tell them, blah, 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 blah. And they were, you know, first checking it. It's like, your mental health okay? You're not hurting yourself, anything like that. And they were fantastic, and I wish I remembered the name, because they were really, really good. But I'd written a letter, gave it to my mum, and sent it to my dad on email. And as I was going to give it to my mum was leaving for the gym. So she had to go. And then she came back and I gave it to her then. But by that point, my dad had already read the email because I'd sent it to him at the same time as when I was going to give the letter to my mum. And he called me and he was really helped, like, supportive. And I can't remember. This is a long time ago now, Jodie. Yeah. It's a while. But but it was probably the typical things of, you know, I love you. And he was giving me advice when I was going to talk to my mum about it. And it was hard because it was really hard for me because I was, as I say, terrified of my parents not accepting me. They did, obviously. Very lucky to have them. But yeah, very, very hard. Hard for me, sort of bringing that up and being like, okay, this is it now. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I know I'm trans, this is why I'm doing it, but God.
The fear you felt, even though your parents had always been so loving and like accepting, just makes you think about how so many people must feel who are from a home where the parents maybe aren't as loving and accepting.
Well, I think it also comes from, like I said, I grew up on the Isle of Wight, very conservative, very close-minded, and grew up with gay people being a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, I am attracted to women, so technically I am gay, but I'm also trans. Holy shit, you know, how's that going to be taken? And that was its own type of like minefield.
When you told your parents,
Yeah.
how long was it from that point until you started transitioning?
I started medically transitioning when I was 17.
So is that like 2 years on?
Year and a half. Yeah, like I said, I can't exactly remember when I told my mum that I was attracted to women, and then I told my parents when I was attracted to women, and then told my, you know, family that I was trans as well. I can't really remember that specifically. However, I socially transitioned at 16. God, I'm trying to work it out. No, I think I told them when I was 14 that I was trans. Yeah, 14 that I was trans, and then socially transitioned at 16, where at my sixth form I'd come out as Isaac, he, him pronouns, dressed masculinely, wore a binder, that type of thing. And then a year later I changed sixth form. By that point I'd been on testosterone for about 6 months. So at my previous sixth form, everybody knew me before. Everybody knew that I was trans. A lot of them I'd gone to school with since primary school. You know, they'd known me since I was about 4 or 5. And then when I changed sixth form, I knew very few people. A couple of my mates were there, but they didn't really tell anyone. And at that point, I lived stealth.
For people who don't know, what does stealth mean?
So stealth means when you're in a part of your transition, I suppose, where you pass as the gender that you identify with, but you look cis, you look cisgender. So like when I say that, when I went to my new sixth form and I was like, you know, my name's Isaac, blah, 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 and everyone was just like, yeah, he's a cis guy, Isaac. Not that people ever said that blatantly, but when I had told people that I was trans, it was very much of a, like,
It was a surprise.
wow, no, you're not. And obviously, trans never has a look. Like you can't go at something. You look trans, you look cis. Like gender's a whole wonderful, beautiful, colourful spectrum. But yeah, so I was stealth, and that's only changed in recent years. Where it's like I don't have to be that. It makes my life easier if I'm not. So I feel like I'm more understood and more heard. And when I was younger and started transitioning medically, and I went through Tavistock, which is the gender clinic in London, they and you know, I would just go for conversations before. I hadn't started testosterone with them actually, but I would go for conversations with the people at Tavistock, and they really urged me and encouraged me to go and meet other trans people, especially people around my age, and I didn't want to. I was male first, trans second. I'm only trans because I have to be that in order to be the male identity that I have. And I think I had sort of like internalized transphobia, I suppose, of like, I don't want to be trans. I'm just a guy, I'm Isaac, I just want to get on and live my life, and I'll start testosterone and I'll transition and that'll be it. And I'll never have to think about it again. Which is so like, my God, what a tiny bubble I had my head in. You know, I really try to close myself off, and and it's like, no, I tell my friends, and I told you, you know, I want people to know, because there's nothing wrong with being cis and there's nothing wrong with being trans, but the whole point of that being is that I'm understood as a trans person. My experience of gender, and also life experience, I suppose, isn't so linear in that I've gone through 2 puberties. I've changed massively. I haven't got photos of me as a kid, as I say that I will show people, and just my perspective of things are quite different. You know, I was socialized as a girl. I identify massively with my femininity and my masculinity. I'm, you know, a combination of the two in a way, and that doesn't remove my identity as a guy or as me being trans. it just adds to my life experience and me as a person. You know, I can be feminine and I can be masculine, and I can accept those parts of my life that I really wanted to shun out when I was younger. So I'm 23 years old, and it's taken me this long where I can finally go and say that, yeah, I'm trans, and I'm proud of that, and I'm happy about that, and I'm confident about that. And it's only this year where I've really gone that I can do that, because what's the worst that's going to happen? And I'm lucky in that I can say that. I'm very, very lucky that I can say that. But it's also something that I've had to find in myself in order to be able to say that.
Oh, God.
Are you okay?
Try not to bloody cry.
This is something that I've had a lot when I've come out to people. And I remember when I was younger, my dad would tell his friends that, by the way, my kid, he's now Isaac. He, him pronouns, you know, this, that, and the other. And I had so many of his friends, adult friends, who would say, oh, you're so brave and you're so courageous. And it really comes down to the fact that I had to do that, because if I didn't, then being brutally honest, I quite frankly don't think I'd be here right now. And that's really weird. And, you know, every time I have a birthday, it's like, I never thought I'd see 20, never thought I'd see 21, never thought I'd see this or that. And yeah, it takes a certain amount of guts and bravery to actually stand up and be like, that is me. I am that person, and that is, you know, I am going to change, and I need people to look at me differently and treat me differently, but also just treat me for who I am and not change that part. Like, treat me as the same person, but respect that part of me. But I get the whole, oh, you're brave and you're this and you're that, and it's just, you know, I was 17 when I've been with testosterone for a while, in the car with my mum, and it was the first time to tell her, but she was driving, and I just said to her, I was like, you know, this is the first time in my life I actually feel truly happy. And I think for her it was a real like, oh, moment, and that was why it was a bad time to tell her. But it was like, up until that point in my life, I felt like I'd just been floating through life, and I wasn't much of a person. I was, you know, I still had my little personality, my little quirks, my little stupid, dumb jokes, but I felt like I was floating. And then it's just like 17, I felt, I'm actually happy. So yeah, it's more of a, I'm living now.
For people who are wanting to transition, hearing people like yourself say those things must be like such an incredible thing to hear. To know that like you can actually be happy one day. You know, you can actually feel comfortable in who you are, and it's just like amazing that you're sharing it. Firstly, but going back to, you know, you said you're really lucky that you passed as, you know, a cis man. Mm-hmm. You've spoken to me a little bit about the privilege you've kind of experienced with that, and how,
so
you know,
bizarre.
It must be so weird.
So bizarre.
It must be so weird.
The social transition, like even like after medication, HRT, testosterone, and starting to be read more and more as a guy, as male, and passing it as cis male. You know, I walk down the street and I know that I look like a cisgendered man, and there's such a privilege of being a man that, you know, albeit I started transitioning at a young age, and so you could say that, yes, whilst when I was read as a girl, the treatment of that could have been down to the fact that I was also young, and so I was just, I'd say when I was read as a girl, I was often spoken for, rather than having my own voice. And you could say, okay, that's down to your age, and people would just speak for you at your age. Or perhaps, you know, the fact that people did see you as shy, people would speak on your behalf of that. But I felt as though that switch, that change between being read as female and then read as male, was suddenly I have my voice. And not my voice as in, oh, I have found my voice, which I had, but also just that, oh, okay, I can have a conversation with people and I feel like I'm more likely to be listened to, or I'm going to be given more space, more time to actually speak. And it's so bizarre and awful, absolutely awful. But, you know, just because you look like a girl, you're not, or you are a girl, that you're not heard, you're not given that space and that opportunity to speak as much. It's fucking disgusting. And that comes from a lot of sexism. I haven't got an appreciation of what it's like to be a woman, read as a woman in society as an adult. But I'd like to think that I at least have some level of understanding of what it's like to experience that prejudice.
Wow. Thanks, Isaac. Thanks
You're
for sharing
welcome.
that on
You're
behalf of
welcome.
all of us ladies out here.
Start testosterone.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. So you've spoken to me before about how growing up, your mum would speak to you about, you know, be careful on the street, like don't go down any dark alleyways, blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
And how that's changed for you?
I still use that. As in, like, growing up, mum was a single mum with one daughter, one little kid, and she would tell me as a child, when you go out, you know, if you ever get lost, go and find, you know, another mum with a pushchair. If you're going down an alleyway, don't do it.
Yeah, don't go down an alleyway.
Turn around, don't do it. Don't be stupid. Don't go down an alleyway in case there's somebody in front of you and somebody behind you, you get trapped. Don't go the short way home, go the long way home if it's lit. Don't go, like, you know, just be as safe as you can. And it's something that I still do. And it's something that I'm hyper aware of. You know, if I'm going home after a night out, or it's late of an evening, for instance, and I'm on the same side of the road as a woman by herself, or a couple of women, I'm going to cross that road because I know that I'm going to feel, you know, somewhat intimidating to them, whether or not, I mean, I'm not, but I understand that seeing a guy just walk behind you can be, okay, we should stop and let him walk in front, you know, we should keep our distance. Yeah, it's something that I'm quite aware of, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine perhaps within the last year, and he's a tall guy, he's like 6'3", and we'd had that conversation of how I'd brought up that my mum had told me these little pieces of life advice when I was younger, and he found it quite interesting because he had never been told that. And I said to him, I was like, you know, when you're walking home, do you not sometimes feel intimidated? And it's like, no. And I get it, he's a tall fella, but he'd never been told that. And I think that's something that, from my understanding, a lot of guys just haven't been taught. And it's something that you tell girls. It's something that you teach them when they're young in order to keep them safe from predators. Sounds awful, but it's something that I still use, something that I still have in mind. If I'm walking home late of a night and there's somebody behind me, I'm going to cross that road because that's something that I have ingrained in myself. But it's just one of those weird little gender things that for some reason we don't need to teach boys when, yeah, you do, because also you need to make sure that your actions are making people feel comfortable and safe. You don't need to know that person in front of you, but if you're walking behind them and it's dark, or you're walking very close behind them and it's, you know, it doesn't even have to be dark. It could be middle of the day. Just cross the street.
Or just hang back a bit.
Yeah, just hang back a bit, or just walk really wide of the pavement, speed up and walk ahead of them.
Do you feel safer, like, for example, like at night on the street now than before you transitioned?
I mean, I was very young when I transitioned.
Oh yeah, of course, you wouldn't have been coming back from nightclubs and stuff. Fair enough.
The 13-year-old me out with my body. Body and lemonades.
I was genuinely doing that at 13 though, so it was a valid question. That was my fault. I'm sorry. I got really, really drunk once when I was like 13, 14 on vodka at like a camping trip with my friends. It was just one night, and I bought vodka with me. And And I didn't know my limits then, obviously. I was very young. I just kept downing it because, with vodka, like, it doesn't hit you and then suddenly it hits you out of nowhere and you're just like absolutely fucked.
Car crash.
Yeah, that was me. It was like I got hit by a train and I blacked out. Next day I woke up. I found this out from everyone else that was there. I nearly kissed one of the boys that I'd always liked in the tent that everyone was supposed to stay in. And then just before we did kiss, I threw up in the tent that everyone was staying in, right in front of him, and then passed out, had to get picked up by my stepdad, who carried me across a lake and up a hill.
What a rebel.
I know. And I had like
child.
a week-long hangover.
Yeah.
And I never had a period where I didn't get hangovers, and I blame that occasion. It was like an initiation into both being drunk and
we were such different 13-year-olds. I was in my room, sad, crying, listening to depressing music.
I did that as well.
You were out getting drunk, throwing up in tents.
Yeah, it was a really fun time, actually. I don't remember anything. Thank God. So something I actually spoke to you about the other day when we had this, like, introduction to what we were going to speak about.
Because we never talk.
We never talk.
I try to avoid it as best I can.
Yeah, I just used you for this, actually.
Yeah, I'm only here for the free coffee.
Okay. What was your lead up to your medical transition like, and what was the process of medically transitioning, if you don't mind me asking?
Again, no, that's fine. Again, very privileged. I tried the NHS route. However, the support that they were providing me wasn't the support that I needed. I was, again, about 16 when I started going to Tavistock, and Tavistock are fantastic. I really have to root for them. They could do more, but also just the way that the NHS is massively understaffed, as is the trans departments. What they're doing is, still good. But for me, it's just they weren't providing the support that I needed. So I went to my GP, got referred, went to Tavistock, massive waiting list, which isn't ideal. Went to TAV, and they were, I had appointments with two ladies who I'd have very deep conversations with about myself, about my trans identity, about family, about mental health, everything. And I was given the opportunity to vent a lot and get a lot off my chest and cry and feel heard and given advice, which was all fantastic. However, when it came down to the actual medical transition that I needed and that I was there for, again, remember at this time in my life, I was like, I'm man first, trans second, only want to do the medication, get that done like that, and then on with my life. And they were offering hormone blockers, which I didn't need. Hormone blockers stop your body from reproducing its natural hormones. So for me, it would have been estrogen, stopping things such as my period and further puberty development. Fantastic. However, I needed more change than that. I needed testosterone. So when I found out that they said, yes, we're going to put you on hormone blockers after diagnosing me with gender identity disorder. I think it was still called that at the time, which has changed now, thankfully, because it's not a disorder. It's a horrible label. But after that conversation with them, I had a full-on breakdown with my parents right outside and just crying to the point where I felt sick and cried on the tube, and just I was like, I'm in the place that I need to be, but all of a sudden, like, there's a massive hurdle in front of me that I'm going to have to wait a year. My mental health couldn't take it. I couldn't take it. So we actually sought out private treatment instead. So I took testosterone privately and then have followed through with my transition privately. I'm now back on the NHS. But very lucky in that my parents were able to financially support me and offer that option to me.
Are there many charities that you know of that can help people with those sort of funds if someone wanted to go private but didn't have the funds? Do you know of any? I don't know. I'm not too sure.
I don't know, but also don't think there was anything like that in the UK.
Right. For people who want to start that journey, what is the sort of process of medically transitioning? Is it like, do you start on hormones for a certain time, and then if you want to go forward with surgeries, you can?
You do it in whichever way that you want. To be trans, it's not a tick list. You don't need to be on hormones. You don't need to have any surgeries. You can have on surgery and nothing else. You can have hormones and nothing else. You can just socially transition and be you. If medical transition and surgical development is something that you need and you want, then go and speak to your GP, get that reference, and then you'll be put on the pathway and a waiting list, which isn't ideal, but take it with a bit of salt. You're in a good direction. You're going the right way. Transition to the gender that you identify with, have a body that you identify with, rather, isn't a checklist. You know, if you're trans and you feel like, I don't feel like I actually need chest surgery, or I don't feel like I want bottom surgery, or I don't want hormones, whatever it is, don't have to do it. Don't feel any like societal pressure in order to fulfill what it means to look like a woman or what it means to look like a man. Your expression of that gender and how you feel and how you want to look is entirely up to you. It's your body, your control.
So earlier you mentioned that you used to identify as he, him, but now you identify as he, they.
Yeah.
Can I ask you why
Yeah.
you decided to change your pronouns?
So I'm completely comfortable in how I look now. And as I've said, I welcome and celebrate those parts of myself that are feminine, are masculine. I'm definitely comfortable with being he, him. I think that's why I use he as my primary pronoun. And then they as my secondary, is just because if somebody looks at me and goes, they, them, I feel like my transness, if you like, is recognised a little bit more. And so I feel completely comfortable in that space of being called they, them as well. It's nothing that I think I would necessarily push, but should somebody call me they instead of he, you know, I'm totally comfortable with that, because I feel as though my gender is more than just male. It's more than, it's definitely not female. I don't mean it like that, but as I've said, you know, I was brought up as a girl, and I've got qualities about myself physically and mentally that aren't stereotypically masculine, whatever you define masculinity as anyway. But my pronouns, I feel as though kind of just can reflect that. So the option of going by they takes that, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah?
Yeah. If you were to go on a date with someone, at what point would you tell them that you're trans?
I think for me personally, I would tell them before. It's completely understandable if you want to tell them after the first time that you've met somebody, but I think it depends on how well I actually know that person. Because I want them to know, because I need to make sure that they're comfortable with it and with me being trans. I'm not cis, can't have my own kids, I don't have a cis-looking body. And so I need to ensure that if I'm going to try and pursue something or see someone, that they need to be aware and support it. Also gives me an understanding of their approach to LGBT people, which is something that's massively important to me. And obviously as a trans guy, I'm not going to date somebody who doesn't look, you know, who doesn't respect that part of me. But I need to make sure that they've, you know, respect LGBT people generally. And it's something that's incredibly important to me, so I need to make sure that they take it well.
Yeah, you want to make sure your views are aligned and that they love every part of you and everything.
Yeah, from the get-go.
Yeah.
What, you don't love me? You don't love that I'm trans?
You're not in love with me on a first date? God.
Hi, so I'm trans. Do you love that, yes or no?
Do you love me? Please, love me. That's me. That's an impression of me. I don't want to be negative about this, and I don't want anyone who's watching this who might be transitioning or will have transitioned already maybe to be like, oh, that's scary, you know. But I was going to ask if you've ever had any experiences where people have been disrespectful, or like you think that they've respected who you are fully, and then they've turned out to not be
romantically
as either, really.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I've had a couple. However, I don't want that to be heard from a place of, oh, God, I'm trans, you know, somebody's not going to like that about me.
Yeah.
Take it from the place of, and this is my approach to it, take my advice if you like, your choice, that if somebody's not going to respect part of you, then why should you respect them? If, you know, as I say, for me, it's something that's so massively important that at the end of the day, if they're not going to take on board that I'm trans, or just, whatever, then quite frankly, they don't deserve my time or my space.
How did you get to that place? Like, you are so much more confident and comfortable.
Time. Really. And it's shit. Because it's taken me a while to get to where I am. But I'm in a place now of my life where I'm just going to do something that's going to make me happy. And if somebody's going to be in it that's actually not going to bring that to me, then they don't need to be in my life. And my gender is in no way a reflection of anybody else's treatment towards me. If somebody's going to treat me badly, then I don't need to take that personally. That's not a reflection of myself. So it's difficult to love the things that you don't love about yourself. But at the end of the day, life is so short that why bother trying to hate and be negative, especially when it's towards you. That's, one of the last people that you should actually be disrespectful to. So if there's something about myself that I'm uncomfortable with, it's not easy, but I would rather be in a place where I can go, I'm not happy about that, but I can still love that part of myself. I can still accept it and recognize myself in that feature. Personality, mentally, whatever. I'm not perfect. I definitely don't mean that in any way. However, it's not necessarily an easy decision. Like, everyone has their own insecurity. I have insecurities aside from my dysphoria, but you don't need to look in the mirror and find them. If you're going to look in the mirror and see them, just go, yeah, that's me. And I love that. And I think that's something that I've come to learn. And it's just with age and maturity and growing. And, it's a journey, which I hate the word, but it is.
If you could speak to your younger self, like maybe 7-year-old Isaac, what would you say?
You'll be okay. It's deep and it's cringy, but you feel alone and you're upset and you're confused and you're frustrated and you don't know anything that's going on. And you don't know where you'll be. And it's advice that I often give people that I don't necessarily take myself, but you know how you say, like, you'll land on your feet to people, and it's like, you'll be okay, you'll land on your feet, you'll be fine. And you might have a rocky landing, you might have a bumpy landing, you may not land exactly on your feet, you may land on your ass, you may, whatever, but you'll land and you'll be fine. And God, it was just thinking about little me and where I've come from. And like I've said the entire time, I've been supported by wonderful people, family and friends who love me unconditionally, and I love them incredibly for that. I struggled to love myself a lot of my life, and I've struggled to see myself. There were years in my life where I couldn't even look in the mirror without it putting me in a terrible mood for days. And I think I've come from that dark place to somewhere where I don't need to feel that. That kid who was so alone, I couldn't see any hope, but it'll work out better than you ever expect. Yeah.
I just want to say, from my perspective as a friend of yours, I love you, and
I love you.
You're a beautiful person inside and out. And for anybody who's ever struggling with anything in life, there are so many people around that will be there for you. And just talk to them. Literally just talk to them. And the more you talk, the more you'll find people who will be there for you and care about you and support you and make you feel better. But you'll also come across people who you realise aren't that person, and you can just filter through the people you're supposed to be around way quicker. Don't waste any time.
Hold your head high, chin up.
Chin up.
You're above them.
Exactly.
Fuck them.
Fuck 'em.
Well, also there are some incredible charities out there. Go and have a look. Try and find someone that you can speak to if you can't speak to somebody in person. I did it when I was younger, and you'll get help in whatever way that you feel best. Just look for it and try not to be afraid to ask. Deep breath.
Yeah.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Just do it.
Just